I think everybody needs to get involved and first have a baseline understanding and to have that voice out there to shape actively on how this technology is going to develop and impact us.
Welcome to another episode of Sell Me This podcast. This week I am incredibly excited to welcome our guest, Dr. Stella Lee. Stella and I dive into an incredibly exciting conversation around education, around government policy and AI, and around what business leaders can do to make meaningful steps in implementing these technologies in their business. I hope you enjoy. So welcome to another episode of Sell Me This podcast. Today I'm incredibly excited to have our guest, Dr. Stella Lee. I promise it's the only time that I'll mention the doctor off the bat for formalities.
Thank you.
I have been looking forward to this episode for a while. You and I met at a Untapped Energy AI Summit.
Correct.
Probably about a month or two ago, and I was blown away by everything that you shared. It was immediately clear to me that we saw the world in a similar way, and so thank you for agreeing to be on the show.
Thanks for having me.
For our listeners, I'd love to just jump right into things, and if you could give maybe a quick introduction of who you are, the work that you do, and maybe we can start there.
Okay, I'm Stella. I run a boutique, as I like to call it, consulting firm. It's me and a couple of staff called Paradox Learning, and it's based in Calgary. I work, I've done so many different projects from NGOs like the United Nations to governments like Yukon government to small, medium enterprise organizations, primarily in digital learning and education tech space. These days, it's all about AI, so I happen to also have a background in that, so I do a lot of consulting in that way. I came from an academic background, so I don't know if you know this, but I was trained as a painter.
I did not know that.
And a designer. So, and I kind of found my way into computer science, so I have a BFA, and I end up getting a PhD in computer science. And so I was an academic, and I like to call myself a now reformed academic turned consultant.
Yeah, you've recovered from the academic side of things. And,
almost.
And so I actually didn't know that you were a painter, but we have a
hence my love for arts.
I know. I was just saying, so we have our tradition on the show where the guest gets to pick the artwork behind us, and so
I love that. Yeah.
And so, can you tell us about this piece? Like, I'm blissfully ignorant on a lot of art stuff, but.
I don't actually know this piece, but I just was drawn. My love is actually in modern or contemporary art, so anything 20th century or kind of late 19th century onward. So I really love abstract, bold, kind of very expressive kind of strokes and colors, and just essentially pushing the limit of what we call art, right? So
I love it, and I love the combination as well, and I'm sure it gives you a really interesting perspective of having that artistic and creative side along with the more digital technology side from your comp sci studies. How do those things blend together? And I imagine it gives you a really interesting view of the world.
To me, I don't see them as two separate things. Like, to me, knowledge, it's one thing, and it's just merely, depending on what you study, give you a different lens, if you will, of looking at the world, right? Art and design give me, an understanding of what a creative process is like. What's design thinking? It's what we actually study in art school back in the days. It just package it in a new term, and now they taught at business schools. With computer science, I think it gives you more of a logical thinking behind that, or more critical thinking, which I would argue art also gives you that. So to me, it's just giving me a different perspective, and not necessarily separately, right?
That makes sense to me. And so when you think about the way that technology is going right now, and it sounds like a lot of the work that you do is consulting how organizations adopt and really strategize around some of the technology shifts that are happening.
Yep.
How much does creativity play a role when you think about the direction that technology is going and the things that AI and some of these new technologies unlock?
So Okay, can I share something else before that?
100%.
I always want to challenge people when they say I'm not creative. People say that. And I think we look at creativity in such a conventional way. By that, I mean people think, oh, I cannot draw, I cannot sing, I cannot dance. But if you look at us as kids, we didn't think that way. Somehow, we were educated out of our creativity. Because like as kids, we all draw, we all sing, we all dance pretty not very self-consciously. You just enjoy it because it's so inherently human. It's to express ourselves. If you look at the caves in south of France, the cave painting, like that's thousands of years old. People inherently wanted to express in different shapes and forms. So to me, I think it's in all of us that we have creativity, but we don't necessarily think about the things that we do are creative because we were so embedded in what conventionally are called creative pursuits. And so I think it actually manifests in so many different ways in business, in the way we work, in consulting, in teaching, in learning, even just not following, like you can be creative commuting by not taking your conventional route, by challenging, normal assumptions about things. I think to me that's creativity. It doesn't have to be, creating a piece of work. It could be just thinking out of the box or just questioning things and not always how things been done.
I think, and I'd never really thought about it that way, but we were talking about it right before the show. I have a almost 3-year-old daughter, and most mornings, I think this morning, and it's out of season, and we're recording this right now in October. She woke up and we could hear her in her bed in her crib singing Jingle Bells at the top of her lungs. But she loves drawing, she loves singing. Dancing and all of those creative expressions, and it's not necessarily what you'd hang in a museum. But,
and it's not. It doesn't have to be, right? I think that's the whole point. It's like in business, even one of the things I always encourage people is, look beyond what you're doing in your own domain, right? Like what's happening in your industry is important to look at your competitors, but it's also important to look at something completely different. Like what's happening in transportation, for example. There's lots of innovation in that. What's happening in finance, what's happening in government. Like it's just so much innovation and so many ways of doing things differently you can learn and incorporate into your own thing.
And so there was a really interesting book, and I'm not sure if you read it, and I'm actually now forgetting the title, but it's really around that idea of generalization. And they studied a lot of top tier athletes.
Oh, okay.
I think it's called Range.
Range, okay.
And so they studied a lot of top tier athletes. And there's this narrative right now that exists. Like, if I want to be the best golfer in the world, I have to follow the Tiger Woods story. And I have to start when I'm 4 years old, and I have to golf 12 hours a day, et cetera, et cetera. And so they wanted to put some science around it, and also debunk that kind of 10,000 hours myth.
Yes. Mark and Gladwell.
Yeah. And so they actually did a study, and the statistically, the best way to become a high-performing athlete is actually not to specialize in it at a young age. And they found that the learnings, whether it be pattern recognition, muscle memory, et cetera, of doing a whole bunch of different things and kind of doing them to the 80%, gave you a much better likelihood of actually exceeding as a professional athlete rather than I'm doing this every day, all day, just because it gave you that range and it gave you the ability to see patterns and things in a different way.
Yeah, I think it's also aligned with the research that we need recovery time, right? Also, I think there's a lot of research on that to say, well, if you step back, if you give yourself a break, if you do something differently, which is also a creative way of doing things, is to, if you can step back and not get so caught up into thinking the same problem, it actually gives you a fresh perspective and also give you a brain to hang back and make connections and see patterns.
Super interesting. And I agree. And so do you think that because I feel like there's been this perpetual push for productivity.
Yeah.
And so do you think that push of productivity comes at the expense of some of the creativity?
I think that's also a very North American thinking as well, in terms of we have to be productive all the time.
Yeah.
Like I love, like, for example, in France, like they are fiercely protective of the free time, right? Like they outlaw, it's illegal for employers to send you emails outside your work hours. And I try to practice that too, by the way. I think it's a very healthy boundary. But I think it's like everything else, that needs to be a balance. Yeah, we need to be productive, but I think there's a point of diminishing return. When you push so much, then you're actually counterproductive. Or if you're not giving people space, it's like Amazon's and Google have these pet projects, right? They give people space to think and create. Amazon wants dozens of hackathons internally, and that's perhaps not directly connected to what they're building, products that are profitable, but it's giving space for the employees to step back and look at things more laterally and more cross-functionally. So I think, some of these companies get it, and that's why they are implementing these activities, these incentives for people to be creative, for people to have space to think. And also I think creativity stems from talking to people that perhaps have it, you don't interact with all the time, perhaps think differently, even disagree with your way of thinking. I think conflict or friction also creates a new way of thinking, because if you're just, hanging out with people that think the same way, you have, echo chamber effect, you have groupthink, you're not coming up with new things because you're all reinforcing the same ideas.
Yeah. And so if you think about, and I'm going to bring this back to technology for 2 seconds, I agree 100% with what you're saying around the importance of conflict, and I recognize that there's humor in the statement of saying I agree 100% with the conflict side of things. But now we have these models that are coming out from a technology and an AI perspective that, for lack of a better word, are very agreeable.
Are you talking about chatbots that always say, "You're brilliant, Stella"?
Yeah. I put some stuff into ChatGPT, and I come out of there feeling like $1 million. Everything I say is right. My view is correct.
Therapy.
And this is perfect. I think that if I ever need an ego boost, but if you think about the power of conflict and the power of people, a term that I've heard used and I love is being anti-fragile. The fact that you need to have some of that friction. What risks do you start to see when everything you say is right?
Oh, lots. But by the way, you could ask your chatbot to be more stern with you. You could request that. And you can tune it. Yeah.
Okay.
I just read I had a quick glance this morning. I haven't kind of dig too deep into this study. They say if you're rude to your chatbot, it gives you better outcomes.
Really?
I don't want to encourage that. But yeah, I agree with you. There's some studies about if what would happen if you always get such positive reinforcement with no criticism or no boundary, if you will. I think it's good to get positive reinforcement, I think, to a degree, but you don't want that degree to be delusional, you don't want people just to think I'm great. Because I was listening to a podcast, I think it was Hartford, and they say, I tested with chatbot and I say, am I the top 1%, most intelligent person in the world? And then he said, and I asked that with a sentence full of mistakes and typos. And the chatbot was to be like, yes, you're like one of the top 1% most intelligent, brilliant person in the world. So that's, that's not good. And people would believe in it, right? I think if you think about, all the conspiracy theories out there, people would believe in it without critical thinking. People's going to buy into think I am the best thing. I think it's hugely dangerous, not just on that front, but the fact that we are taking these AI outputs without critically breaking it down and evaluate them. I think that's a bigger problem, not just the fact that you think, you're being reinforced positively all the time. I think it's just a general of like, it's just taking it as it is without questioning it.
So you probably have a very interesting lens on how people are actually using AI right now. And so I think that, from my exposure, like there's a lot of people that are on the very front end, which is like the consumer ChatGPT users, we'll call it, which and then there's a lot of very kind of scientific elements. But how do, like from your perspective and the work that you're doing, how are people actively adopting AI right now?
I think there's a lot of interest. I think people are kind of piecemeal testing and trying things out. Gen AI definitely has gone mainstream. I even hear people talking about it at the farmers market, like everyday conversations now, right? It's even 3 years ago, you don't hear that. And so many, it concerns me a little bit because it's almost like people would casually say, oh, my AI said that. My AI did that without giving any reference, without giving any constraint. I think people are using it. A lot of them are using it for information seeking, if you will. It's almost like a Google replacement. Surprisingly, less people are using it like a therapist. You think there's going to be a lot of people doing it, but there's actually less, but more for information seeking. And I think that's a good thing because it's much more natural, more targeted. It's if you use it well, if you know how to craft the prompts critically and iteratively, I think it's a very good tool. I don't necessarily think it saves me time or people's time in general. If you use it well, it takes some time, right? Like, as you know, it's
totally.
You don't trust the first output. I never trust the first output. I was like, okay, break this down to me. How do you come to this conclusion? Give me references on that. And the references half the time is not right. It's outdated. Some of them, they don't even exist. So it takes time. But I think people start understanding that now. I think it helps that the technology is also building that in. Now, it's several iterations ago that ChatGPT didn't give you references. It didn't give you citations. You have to perhaps ask for it. Now it kind of give it to you. And just this morning, I was asking ChatGPT one thing, and it's actually going through the thinking steps, and it's telling me what it's thinking and say, okay, this is interesting. I'm going to look here first. Then I'm going to look at this source. I'm going to combine those two, and I'll give you an average of the percentage. So you kind of see that. And so the technology is also, making it more obvious or more accessible for you to understand it. So I think people are start building that critical thinking skills in their interaction with it. I still think we haven't quite realized the full potentials of what we can do with these kind of technologies, especially with Gen AI and AI in general is a different conversation.
And so I recognize that this is a moving target and that there's no clear answer. But what are some of those opportunities? Because going back to creativity, I think that it's such a functional rewiring of how we think about what technology can do. That I think people are really outside of I'll call it the ChatGPT magic tricks. Struggling to see how does this actually apply in what I do day to day.
Yeah, I think honestly, use cases is still emerging because the technology changes so quickly, right? But the full potential or more promising potentials, I would say, is in looking at more bigger patterns or different patterns, right? The patterns that we, it's not obvious to humans. And looking at really huge amount of data across multiple sources, like looking at globally, like global trends. I think it's a good way of looking at using Gen AI to say, well, in terms of migration pattern, for example, or climate change, or talent development across the globe, right? Like education, for example. What are some emerging needs of the next generation? How can we allocate that resources adequately or equitably? So I think those are huge opportunities in looking at patterns, but also not so much even prediction, but help us better inform in creating policies, in allocating resources, in addressing some of the tougher questions, like, if it's about, equitable access. What does that mean, right? How does data help us, get better insights, but then for us to make better policies out of it? So I think those are opportunities, and education is just one example. It's the one that closest to my heart. So I like to see that happening more and more.
And so is that how you'd classify a lot of your work today in the education space, more so than anything? Like, is that where most of the heavy lift is today?
Yeah, mostly education. It's the umbrella term. Of course, it's the K through 12 and university, the more formal education, which I do a fair bit of work in. I also work with governments in what we call the workforce development, talent attraction and retention, and succession planning. Just basically in a changing conversation about the future of work and the changing work task and displacement with AI. How can we better equip people for the very, very uncertain future? So with organization, it's about how do you build that AI literacy and AI fluency. But with organization also, like, how do you use AI so people trust it? People don't feel displaced. People don't feel disempowered. And so a lot of my work is about supporting that kind of adoption.
So I do want to come back a little bit later to the conversation around AI and the future of work and what it means from a talent and a workforce perspective. But I want to stay on the idea of government for 2 seconds, which, at a very simple lens, like, what role do you see government needing to play as these technologies and these tools evolve?
At the national level or international level?
Let's say both.
Okay. You don't ask easy questions, do you?
This is the softball free zone.
Yeah. I think nationally, I'm quite critical about the Canadian government. I call it tough love because I care, because I'm Canadian. I live here. I want us to be competitive globally. I think we can do more. I think we definitely need policies. We still don't have an AI policy. Like, the EU has the first AI EU Act, and along with that, there's so many things, right? Like, they were leading with GDPR to start with, so they have a good base to build on top of that. And one of the mandates now in EU is every organization have to equip their staff with AI literacy training. Like, every single organization.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I know. Same with, I think Singapore has a mandate to train all the students, to teach all the students with AI literacy skills. Finland has been leading that for some time with free AI literacy education for citizen, right? Yeah. And I haven't seen anything like that here. And it's challenging too, because education is the provincial matter. And so federally, it's hard to kind of have the two-tier system, right? And how do you mandate something that essentially is a provincial matter? And then there's the traditional education, but there's also citizen education that I like to see more of here. And I like to see government to also encourage more on the AI ecosystem in general, like for companies to experiment. I know that we're working very hard on growing a startup culture, but I think it should not just be startups. I think it needs to be everyone.
You're speaking my language here, and it's one of my pet peeves. And I we're fortunate to be in Calgary, where I think that there is a very interesting and exciting, startup community that's really starting to flourish.
Yeah.
But there's a narrative that I keep hearing that's really alarming, which is a lot of these, very innovative organizations are having to go elsewhere to not develop their product, but find their first customers.
And once they get some success, they left, right? Like, because they got bought, they got merged, they need to move, locations. Yeah.
And they still need somewhere to sell their stuff. And without some of these larger, more established organizations trialing some of these innovative technologies, whether they be AI or whether they be some sort of new and novel way to solve problem X, if we're having to go to the States to find our first customers or to the EU, then inevitably you create pathways out for your IP, for your people, for your organizations, and we just don't create that ecosystem at home here. And it just becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Sorry, you've got me on a soapbox.
Oh, no. It's not the first time. Like, if you look at the whole tech development through the past couple of decades, it's the same story.
Yeah.
Like, we had some success stories locally, and they kind of disappeared, or they kind of got bought out and they moved to the States, or they moved to Europe, or they fail, like RIM. And it's sad, right? And so we don't, and again, I think focusing on startup, it's great, but I think it really needs to be from the ground up for all types of organization. And if you look at the Canadian business ecosystem, we don't have multinationals as we like, not as many of them, right? 90% of companies are small, medium enterprises. So we need to support them. We need to focus on that.
And this is where, and I'm curious on your perspective on this. I think that some of the digital tools that are coming out create an incredible opportunity to rethink about how we compete and to rethink about how we compete on the global scale.
Are you thinking about a one-person unicorn conversation?
Maybe. So what's your perspective? And maybe for our listeners, what is the one-person unicorn conversation?
Oh, the idea that now with AI tools, you don't need multiple person running a startup and still make the unicorn status. Unicorn is what? Is it
I think
10 billion or?
I thought it was $1 billion.
Oh, was it 1 billion?
Yeah.
Okay, it's maybe 1 billion.
Who knows?
I can't get numbers that large.
we'll fact check ourselves afterwards. It's
I think it's that number.
It's large.
It's large. So basically, the premise is that instead of having a team of a larger team of people building a company to get to that stage that's value at a gazillion dollars, now you only need one person, or maybe three, I don't know. But the idea is it would drastically reduce the number of manpower to build a company.
And so I think you segued me perfectly back into the conversation that I kind of tabled earlier, which was, what impacts does AI have on the workforce, right? And so, if we're able to create $1 billion in value or economic value with one person,
right?
Maybe there's this Shangri-La state where every single person has $1 billion company, but I think the realistic scenario is probably much different than that. What do you foresee happening? And maybe I'll break it down into kind of short, medium, and long term around some of these challenges or opportunities that might come from what's happening in AI right now.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's not going to be like every other street would have a one-person unicorn. It does create more opportunities, I think, for organizations to experiment, to perhaps I hope it will level the playing field a little bit more, because some of even the tools that are available now, you need money to buy them before, right? You need money to hire a team to build a platform. Now you can just pay for a $20 monthly subscription. You can have a platform. And it's pretty amazing that, AI can help you build some of the the technologies behind what you need to build your company. So I hope that means people that have less means can start companies. People that have a good idea, or young graduates, like our very nice producer here.
Yeah, Zach right over here.
Yeah, over here. Young graduates would also give them alternatives to full-time employment in light of the AI conversation about displacing jobs and the increased difficulties in looking for particularly entry-level work, right? As you know, a lot of the AI displays jobs that are more entry-level. And so maybe it would encourage people to say, here's an alternative pathway. And from that perspective, I hope that helps, especially with the Canadian economy. I think it's already been known that it's difficult to get into a field. If you talk to new Canadians coming here with foreign credentials, it's notoriously difficult to get into a professional field that needs credentialing. It's hard for young graduates. It's also difficult for people that are on the other end of the career, right? Like in terms of people that are older and wanted to change, I think that would also help them as well. And as you know, Canadian, we have an aging population here. So
well, because I was going to ask the flip end of the conversation there, which is, sure, there's some short-term economic value potentially by being able to create more with less.
Yeah.
But what happens when we start to have a gap on the front end of our workforce? And I'll use a really kind of crude example from like traditional consulting firms.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so a lot of the like very traditional, we'll say like kind of big 4S consulting firms have a very scientific model that says, 100 people in, whittle down to 50, whittle down to 25, and out of X amount of people, we get one senior partner 25 years from now. And so they have a very specific calculus. But what happens when you don't get that experience on the way up the chain?
Oh, I know. You have to build your talent pipeline, right?
Yeah.
Like if you've never done like the basics, how do you know what it takes to run an office? How do you know the basics of accounting? Or if you haven't done the grunt work, like how do you be a good manager? Like you don't know what it took. It's a huge concern. So I don't agree with that. I don't think they should displace the entry level workers as well. I mean it's a huge question, as you know. That it's still changing. Like for example, I think was it IBM that lay off a bunch of people and then 6 months later they rehire them back. And so I don't think companies even know. I think they react to economic incentives, and then when it no longer works for them, they have to like pivot. So I'm watching that space closely. I'm not convinced getting rid of the entry-level work, it's the solution. I do think we need to redesign work. I do think we need to rethink in terms of breaking down work task instead of job titles, right? Like what does it mean to be a junior accountant, a junior business person, like all the entry-level work? Perhaps we need to think about, okay, there is AI involved, but AI has so many problems right now that human needs to be the one that's overseeing it. It needs to be the one reviewing the work. And along with that, perhaps AI can teach the entry-level workers how to improve and build the career pathways. I think that should be the way to go.
Yeah, and I agree once again with this idea that things need to be functionally reimagined. And going back once again to the idea of creativity really being the superpower.
Yeah.
Our organizational structures of today are very much designed and built around this idea of the assembly line of people, right? How do we produce?
I know. We haven't changed since the 19th century, did we?
And so you kind of have this, for better lack of a better, a pyramid,
right?
Or whatever shape you want to call it, but it's a very kind of command and control type organizational design. And I think that the opportunity to reimagine what that looks like, not just from an execution of work, but from a quality of life, from a space for creativity, space to enjoy. Like, I think that there's this pot of gold at the end of the rainbow that comes from some of these technologies if we can take that leap.
Yeah. Also, I think it gets back to our early conversation about government too, right? We need regulations. We need incentives, and internationally too. I think there needs to be some regulatory bodies that work together because it cuts across every industry, but it also cuts across the world, right? It doesn't happen just here. It doesn't happen just in North Korea. No. It happens everywhere. And so I think having a governmental role, in kind of help shaping that, I think that's critical.
So how much, and you might not have a lens into this, but how much cross-governmental collaboration are you seeing? Like, is it, every country for themselves right now, or are you starting to see more collaboration in terms of how people are piecing these policies, et cetera, together?
I see a bit of both. I definitely see each country its own kind of, and with different agendas. I think it's definitely like the nuclear race, if you will. China is putting major effort in building AI superpower and incentivize different provinces and different counties and at that level of government to build out AI. Same with so many, like Europe, it's just announced big incentives for, big funding. I mean, EU in general, it's always been very collaborative within the European Union, which makes sense to them. Clusters of countries is geographically close to each other. Of course, yeah. And so they could be leading in that sense in terms of regulations. They have been. Places like I've seen, like the United Nations types of NGOs been doing some of that work. UNESCO, UNICEF been doing some of, and also OCED has like a new.
I'm not sure if I'm familiar with that.
So it's kind of like the developed country research arms or policy making. So they also have an AI literacy that's kind of a combination of different country experts that come together and look at. I see a lot of work being done with the AI literacy or what does it mean to be AI literate or digital literate or AI fluent. Yeah. So there's a lot more collaborative work being done across countries in that sense. In terms of policies, I don't know. I tend to monitor a few countries just to see what they're doing. Like UK is doing great policy work. They have AI use cases, libraries that you can look into, and I haven't seen that in Canada yet.
That's very interesting. Yeah. So you've mentioned the term AI literacy a handful of times.
Yeah.
And I know in previous conversations that you and I have had, there's a really important distinction between the idea of AI literacy and AI fluency. Mm-hmm, Can you walk me through a little bit of your thoughts on both of those points?
Yeah, I mean, some of it is, I think it's a spectrum, right? It's a finer definition. I think literacy, it's kind of your basics, your foundation building, if you will. It's just think about literacy. What is basic literacy, right? You can read, you can do numbers, you can have critical thinking skills, you can you can tell truth from fiction, all that stuff, right? And you can communicate well. All of that is basic literacy. So if you translate that into AI, by the way, I think it's a continuum of digital literacy. I think AI, it's so new, so we differentiate that from traditional computer science technologies, but I think eventually it's going to fall into just tech. AI as a tech, there's a bit of a joke about that to say, it's AI until it's not new and shiny, and then it's just regular tech, right? And so I think it's a continuum of what we've been building for like the past 20 years of what we call digital literacy. So translating that from basic literacy is, you need to understand the technology. What is AI? It's not one thing. It's a collection of different techniques. The definition changes over time, and AI, there's different domains within that. There's different ways of doing AI. There's your Gen AI, there's predictive AI, there's robotics, and a whack of different fields together. So people need to have a general understanding, right? You need to have a general understanding of how data works with AI. How does that impact AI models and output? You need to understand critical thinking skills. You need to understand how creativity, the relationship between creativity and AI. You need to understand what are some use cases in AI. You need to understand the ethical concerns, which is another topic that we can talk for another hour, Keith. But fluency really, it's to me at least, is another step up. Because if you think about speaking a language, I can speak French. Am I fluent in it? No. So there's a difference in mastery, I think.
Right.
So fluency is, you can perhaps teach these concepts to other people. You could drive policies. You could impact change in light of AI development and advancement. So fluency, it's that mastery level that you can actually help shape the field. It doesn't necessarily need to be technical. You could be someone that understanding limitations of AI and the risks. And so you can shape policy that way from a more sociological perspective. So by me advocating AI literacy and fluency, it doesn't mean everybody need to be a data scientist. It doesn't mean everybody needs to start building AI models, but I think everybody needs to get involved and first have a baseline understanding and to have that voice out there to shape actively on how this technology is going to develop and impact us.
Yeah.
So
whose responsibility do you think it is to make sure that we have that level of, we'll start at the baseline literacy across a population?
So whose responsibility before for basic literacy?
Yeah.
Government, right? Because we have education, we have compulsory education. And so I think government need to take the lead to start with that. As you know, we as human beings are not very self-motivated or disciplined in any shape and form. Speaking for myself here. But I think there needs to be some structure in place, if you will, to help guide us and also to help us understand why we need it so much, right?
Yeah. Well, and even if I think back to bring it to a kind of maybe a more digestible analogy, one of the biggest things that kind of separated people back in the before, 1800s, 1700s, et cetera, was the ability to read, the ability to write,
right, yeah.
And not to be able to code, but the ability to just read a book, and the knowledge gap and the knowledge boost that came from being able to do that. All of a sudden, you gave way more power to people. You gave way more power to different thought, et cetera, and the ability for nations, areas, regions, geographies to compete really came from the ability to educate their population. Don't you think and see this as an imperative to just be competitive at a base economic level?
Absolutely. 100%. I mean, government is just the first step, right?
Yeah.
Especially if you look at from a capitalistic demographic society perspective, we also need that as a competitive advantage, and also as it's something that you need to do so you're not being excluded or left behind. So think about if you don't read, how much of information is being left out for you. So if you don't understand AI, it's increasingly embedded in everything we do in our houses, right?
Yeah.
It's all the AI embedded devices as well. So you don't want to be left out of the society. So I think there's also personal interests involved. It's also, I think the community also need to take on some responsibilities as communities. I think there needs to be a community level education, support in understanding and developing that literacy. I think, of course, school, but also society, nonprofit organizations. So I guess my response is everyone at different levels need to be take up that responsibility of developing the literacy for AI.
I love that, and that makes complete sense.
Libraries, I mean, they play a major role in information literacy, right? So it's a natural extension to be advocating and supporting AI literacy at the library level.
I think so, and the infrastructure is there already. And,
exactly.
Everyone has
a gathering place. Yeah. So
I love it. So if we think about turning the corner to, very practically, if I'm a business leader, if I run a $20 million mid cap oil and gas company.
I thought you are a business leader.
I guess I guess I don't have to pretend that much, but
exactly.
And maybe I'll kind of transport it. I feel like I know enough to be dangerous in this space. I feel like I still have infinity questions, but there's a lot of people that I talk to that are just so overwhelmed about where to get started. And so
I know. Yeah.
They know that it's important.
Yep.
They know that it's something that has to be part of their business strategy.
Yeah.
But have zero clue of where to get started when it comes to taking the first step on this journey. So from your perspective, what do they do?
I completely understand that. Even as someone who actually has a comp sci background, I feel overwhelmed all the time. Like literally every day you wake up, there's just 10 stories about AI, right? It's overwhelming. But I think the impetus is you have to get started somewhere, and it's never too late. I really dislike the narrative out there. Sometimes you hear it's like, if you haven't used AI, it's too late. I'm like, no, that is not a good place to start in terms of encouraging people to try. So I think it's never too late. It's, start at any time, but it doesn't have to be a big thing. It doesn't have the media hyped up so much about AI. So it's this mystical, almost like godlike being, which isn't. It's a tool, right? It's a technique. It's a platform. Yeah, it's something that's it's a pretty big deal, but it doesn't have to be, and it doesn't have to be ingested in one goal. You can start by taking a little bite here, a little bite there, and start with just one thing. And I would start with, what is it that, like, from a business perspective, I work with businesses on that, and I always say, let's start with your business needs. Like, what are something that you're dealing with that are a bit of a pain point for you? Like, what is something that it's a bottleneck, or where are the opportunities you're trying to like seek out? Where do you want to grow your company? What do you think these opportunities are, or where are something that's holding you back? Like, what are some problems you're dealing with from a business perspective, right? So start there. I don't start with AI. I start with, like, what's your own use cases, and start thinking about, okay, if it's for example, customer complaints, you get lots of them from your call centers. It's becoming a problem. So start there and look at what AI tools, platforms, technology can help with that, and start testing that. Start investigating into, maybe I try this one tool and see if that helps, and use it in a very in a creative, experiential pilot kind of way. Say, let's implement this for 6 months. Let's try it out. Let's put a small team together. Test it and make sure you measure if it works, right? And that's all there is to it. You don't have to start with this big implementation of AI in every department. You don't have to start with everybody need to be up and running with an internal AI it's built, that's massive, that everything needs to be checked. It's just with that already get you started. And there's no two ways about it. You need to start playing. You need to start testing. You need to start shopping and looking at tools, or whether you build it internally or you work with an external vendor. You start kind of testing things and get demos, get people to try it out and get some feedback.
So as people get started, do they need different people around them? Do they need, if you were to think of the demographic of someone that helps organizations get through this, does the soft skills of this person change? Or the things that they bring to these leaders? What are some of those skills that are needed to help organizations through this?
Yeah, I think you definitely need different business departments to work together. I think it's I think it's a unique thing about AI. It's sometimes when you implement a piece of tech in the past, you can just have 2 or 3 departments and that's it. And AI cuts across so many departments. You need to work communications department, right? Because you need to communicate this, how this is being done, how is it affecting people, what are some risks associated with that. So you might have to work with legal, you might have to work with L&D for training and upskilling people. You probably need to work with procurement. So I think if anything else, the soft skills is even more important now, because you have to work with so many different groups and you have to manage and negotiate relationship, make sure that everybody has a say and everybody can bring a piece of the AI lens to this project. So if anything else, I think it's even more important about teamwork, about communications, about empathy, right? Because we work with and cultural awareness. I think that's becoming, and culture doesn't just mean countries, but also different subcultures within an organization. The IT teams have their own culture, HR has their own culture, even to understand how to make sure you communicate so they understood, the language, the shared language, if you will. So those are all the soft skills that perhaps we need to up our game a little bit more.
That makes complete sense to me. So you and I could keep talking for probably 3 or 4 more hours.
Are we getting a signal now to stop talking?
I don't know. Like I said, I think that I have one thing that I want to end with, which is,
Sure.
If you have kind of some final thoughts around maybe the opportunity that's in front of us as business leaders, as a society, from AI and from some of these technologies that are going to be game changing. What thought would you want to leave people with?
Wow. So many.
You got to pick one.
Okay. I think don't be scared by AI, but also don't get bought into the hype. I think go into it with a balanced lens. There's going to be opportunities, but there's also limitations and challenges and things that are risky. So think about that and make sure you do it in a way that's responsible, in a way that's transparent, in a way that, don't get caught up in the efficiency game. Think about impact, think about opportunities.
I love it. And so I'm sure people coming from this conversation will have just as many questions as I did, and probably even more for you.
I have more questions than answers, honestly.
If people wanted to get in touch with you, is there a way, the best way to do that, if they want to learn more about you, around the work you're doing with Paradox? What's the best way?
So my website is paradoxlearning.com, and you can email me at stella@paradoxlearning.com. I am fairly active on LinkedIn as well. My LinkedIn handle is just Stella L, or just search my name. I think you should able to get to me. I'm always happy to have a conversation. I'd love to, like I say, I have more questions that I have answers for. So I love hearing other people's perspectives as well. So, yeah.
Fantastic. This has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show today.
Thank you. It's a great conversation.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
And I feel like there's a part 2 in our future, but this has been fantastic. So thank you so much today, Stella.
Thanks, Keith.
If you've made it this far, like and subscribe on YouTube, or follow and leave a review on your favorite podcasting platform so you don't miss any future episodes.